Welcome back to the Everything Property Podcast. Now, I realise that over the past few weeks, we've had some amazing guests with huge portfolios. The feedback from you, the audience, is that you want to hear more investor stories of those who are still in the building phase of their portfolio. Today's guest has quite the interesting background, from being awarded Rising Star and a Young Gun finalist in his first year as a broker to being placed in the top 100 mortgage brokers Australia-wide out of 20,000 total. Now, 4.5 years in, and he's also managed to build a property portfolio of 13 properties whilst also co-owning an F45 gym. Here to tell us what he does in all his spare time, Jyh Kao. Welcome to the Everything Property Podcast. How are you?
Thanks so much, David. Really appreciate you having me on. Love what you're doing with the podcast as well.
Thanks, mate. As a fellow podcaster, you know the grind and you know how it works. But mate, I'm interested to hear about and what we were speaking about offline, and what I feel like we both kind of resonated with was those days. Working in corporate, you worked for quite a big company. Everyone would know, a lot of people would be signed up with. Not so secure with data these days, but you probably know who I'm talking about. But you were with them for 10 years, and for whatever reason, one day you decided that you no longer wanted to work with them, and you threw in the towel. You quit, you left. Tell me about that story.
Yeah, it's going back a long time ago. I remember my first job at Optus, so large telco company. 2011 was when I started, and I started as a graduate outside of university. Had a commerce degree, majored in finance and marketing. I was like, okay, my first job, I'm going to go into telco, give myself a crack, and got into marketing. And as I was working in this large corporate, 10,000 employees, right? Big company. So you obviously learn a lot of things, and you see a lot of things as well. My first paycheck was about $50,000, and I thought I'd made it. I was like, you finally got a full-time salary. And as I was working throughout the years, I just learned that saving my way to wealth was not going to be the way, right? $50,000 after you get taxed, after you pay your expenses, you're probably left with $20,000 at best, right? Yeah. So I was thinking, this is just going to take a long way for me to get to, where my wealth goals were. But the interesting thing is, as I was working at Optus, I started to learn more and more about, I guess, the commercial side of things, because everything we do is all about trying to generate profit and money for the company. And I was working in their prepaid mobile product, and you start to see a lot of money, right? You start to see the money that the businesses are generating. And it was a $600 million revenue business in terms of what I was working on. Yep. And I was just really interested in the commercial side of things. And naturally, I started looking at how can I personally invest outside of my job to look at how can I build wealth. And that's where the property investing journey started to kickstart.
Okay. And was there... Where do you get bitten? Where do you get bitten by the bug? Are you one of those people that sort of went to all the early seminars? Are you reading books, podcasts? What are you doing back in? Because we're going back some time now. So, what are you doing back in those days? I think your first, and I mean credit to Jyh as well. Just like Michael Shah sent through an entire list of his portfolio, addresses, values, what you've bought for. So there's full disclosure with these. I mean, your first purchase is back in 2013. So what are you doing to get your head around property at that time?
Yeah, you're 100% right. I remember that time there was no podcasts. There was not many books either. And not many people were really talking about their property portfolios either. It was a very taboo subject, right? Not many people would even talk about money.
Yep.
So there were lots of property seminars, I remember. So I went to so many of them. And that's where I started to get hooked. I was like seeing these people in their 30s talking about their multi-million-dollar portfolio. I was like, how is this even possible? Like, I'm probably just turned 20, and I was like, they're 10 years ahead of me, but how are they even at multi-million? Yeah. So I started to get really, really interested into it and went to as many property seminars as I could. Obviously heard the whole, house and land packages and all the different types of stories and out there, and just started off with nothing, right? And then 2013 was when I got my first pay rise, because after I did a 2-year grad program, pay jump had gone from about 50 to 70K, and I was very happy. So $20,000 pay rise. My parents are like, you have to do something with your money. Don't just do nothing. And they weren't investors. They were just saying, you've just got to buy an asset, right? Buy a property. Because they just knew that's what wealthy people did.
Yeah.
So I took the first leap of faith, bought a unit in North Sydney. That was the first property I ever looked at. It was in a block of 100 units, 42 square meters.
No. Was there a pool?
No pool.
Oh,
it was a really old yellow brick.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was about 70 years old, built in the early 1900s. But first property I ever saw.
Oh, man. So many issues with that, but obviously you don't know at the time, right?
Yeah.
Is this as an investment or is this to live in, to move out of home?
It was an investment.
Okay.
Yeah, and I gave up my first home grant because I didn't want to live in it. So I wanted to live at home to continue borrowing and just keep my expenses lower.
How was the performance of that asset over time? How did that one go?
This is a very interesting conversation and topic because it was my best and worst. And I'll explain.
I'm looking at the numbers here and I'm thinking, you did sell it in 2023. I'm thinking it's your worst. So tell me what was your best? Like, what was
it was the best to start off with. And the reason I say that is because 2013 was at the cusp of a Sydney boom. And I didn't know that. Right? The reason why I bought this is because I always thought you have to buy blue chip properties, right? Because everyone says you've got to buy in a good suburb. And I thought North Sydney is a very nice suburb.
Yep.
Close to the CBD. Cannot go wrong. Bought an inferior quality asset because it's in a block of 100. It's tiny. You're getting a very small piece of land size.
Yeah.
And I thought I can't go wrong with this property, right? Bought it, and then Sydney started to take off. So 2013, I think to about 2019, you saw really good growth in Sydney market. And I didn't realize that you could use the equity in the property. So from 2013 to about 2016, the property had grew significantly. Bought it for about 428,000 in 2013. And then I remember 2 years later after renovation, I did a desktop vow. I think it came back at around 700K.
Wow.
So it was a really, really big jump. And I was able to take the equity out of that property, which was much higher than my income at the time.
Yeah.
And that's where I got hooked. I was like, the equity growth is higher than what I was earning at Optus. And so that's why I say it was my best performer at the time, because I couldn't have it to compare anything. So that obviously did its job. The property did what it needed to do to get the equity out of the property. But it's also the worst performer because 10 years later, which I sold in 2023, had only sold for $560,000. So $428,000 purchase price, $560K sale price.
You dropped off in value then?
It basically made no money.
Okay.
If you look at the 10-year growth, it was what, $13,000.
You said 428, it jumped to 7.
Yeah.
And then it came back
down.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it went up and then came down. So had I sold it early, I could have made a lot more profit.
Okay, but the good thing about this is, you've got a little bit of money and, you've got some equity. I see that it's taken you, it's taken you 2 years to buy. Then after that, but was there any sort of secret sauce to save up that initial deposit to get into that game? Because I always say to everyone, the first deposit and the first purchase that you make is essentially the hardest. And obviously with equity, pull that out and go again. You don't have to do any work for that. But what was the secret sauce to save up such a deposit at the time?
Honestly, there was no secret sauce. I saved really hard. I was working from the young age of 14. My first job was at Macca's. I remember I was flipping burgers for $6 an hour. So I was working really young, just saving everything I could, living at home up until almost, I think, late 20s, 28, 29 when I moved out. And my parents were also very happy to support me as well. So they basically said, if you can save X amount, we'll match it and to help you contribute for the deposit. Yeah. So without their support, I wouldn't have been able to get into the first property. But they taught me the hard work of trying to save that deposit so they could also contribute a bit too.
All right, perfect. So put that together. We're 2 years on now. I mean, are you continuing to grow your property education, or how's work going? And then what is the theory around your next purchase?
Good question. I think at that time, as you're starting out, you never really know what the blueprint is or what the strategy is. And if you think you know, you're still trying to work it out. And that's where I was really trying to work out, like, what is my next move? And good point about the education side, because that's when I was still really soaking up as much as I could, going to those property seminars. I'm not sure if you remember a lady called Cherie Barber.
Yeah.
Renovating for Profit.
Yeah, we know Cherie Barber. Yeah.
So she's one of my biggest inspirations, because I've been watching her for a long time. And what really got me into property was also the aesthetics part of it. So I really like the renovating and making properties look nice and the styling. Because I'd go into all these properties on the weekend and you walk in and go, oh, this place looks really nice. The furniture's nicely styled, and that's what drew people in. So I did her course, and that was one of the investments that I made. Spent, I think, about $5,000 to go do her course, and it was a live event as well. Wow. So you basically had everything online in modules, but at the end of it, you go to a seminar where she invites all her students, and you physically get to go there and see her, and she speaks and she goes through all the modules, and you go through the exercises one by one. So a lot of it was practical, and then you'd have exercises going in there trying to work out what your potential equity is, what you could do to the property, and see if you can try and get an uplift in equity to go again. So what I did was I applied the learnings from that course into the North Sydney apartment. So I spent about $10,000 doing a cosmetic renovation.
Wow.
To transform the place. It was a very ugly yellow brick property. Nothing special about this. If you go online, you look at the old photos, it was pretty average.
Yeah.
So all I did was just follow exactly what she did. Spend money on the things that make the biggest impact.
And what are they for anyone that's sort of listening to this and thinking what they can, Can you divulge the secrets of, or some secrets from that course without everyone having to jump in and
100%.
Spend the money?
Yeah. So a lick of paint. Can't go wrong with that. Fixtures and fittings, floorboards. So rip the carpet out, put down fresh laminate floorboards, so that way it looks nice and modern. Had the popcorn ceilings. So what we did was we did false ceilings.
Okay, on top of them.
Yeah, on top of it.
Yep.
Left a little bit of room so we can fit some LED lighting in there as well, because they had all those ugly oyster lights.
Yeah. Okay.
So the lighting transformed the place alone, right? And then the paint, the fixtures and fittings, some curtains. Some of the rooms we use window shutters as well to make it look nicer, and styling, of course. And then after that was all done, just transformed the place. I wanted to live there.
Wow.
So that's where I moved in.
Yeah, okay. 10 grand, you've done well for that. And I think I always say that too, is that like you'd be amazed at what a coat of paint can do. Like I think people underestimate, and sometimes they can't see through it. I bought a house the other day. It had a purple master. It had the second bedroom was bright blue and the third bedroom was bright green. And both the sunrooms, and I was posting these on Instagram as I was renovating, both the sunrooms were like a aqua, like a very bright aqua. It's like a lot of people probably can't see past that, but at the end of the day, it's a few coats of paint. If you're doing it yourself, it's so cheap. You get a 15-litre tub for $256 from Bunnings.
They're the best types of properties.
Best types of properties.
They're the ones that people don't like.
So how do you pick up is the second one doing the same thing? You went to Queensland for your second purchase, suburb called Wynnum. What's the technique? What's the strategy? Same sort of thing, rinse and repeat? Or...
Yeah, pretty much spot on. So after this purchase, I learnt that I shouldn't have been buying units.
Okay.
Yeah, because I thought, okay, I need to look at getting a better quality asset. Everything I learned was buy land, buy a freestanding house, so that way you can do more. Because obviously with the unit, there's only little that you can do, right? It's mostly cosmetic, and after that, you can't really do much to it.
Yep.
So started to look into different states, and that was really out of my comfort zone, because at that time, you don't really hear of people investing interstate. A lot of it was just, near where you live in your own backyard. And I wanted to look at going into interstate, spoke to a buyer's agent as well. Buyer's agent really recommended to go into Brisbane at the time. I think a lot of people said Brisbane was going to take off. But the funny thing is this property did nothing for about 5 years.
I mean, you bought in 2015, so you're...
So I bought at the very, very bottom of the cycle in Brisbane. So again, another mistake, because I didn't really know about market cycles at the time. I just thought Sydney did really well, and the next property I buy is probably going to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. So the main reason I wanted to go buy interstate is because my borrowing capacity and deposit was getting a little bit squished now. Right. My income's still only about $70K. Right? I just spent pretty much everything on this property. had some equity that I could take out, which I did. But even after taking out the equity, you're still increasing your debt level as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I still had HEX as well. So borrowing power wasn't that strong. So I had to go look into a different area, which was a cheaper purchase price. So that property was about $500K.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to buy that property.
How'd you find the area? What drove you to Queensland? Was it the buyer's agent bought this for you? Okay. Yeah, perfect.
So buyer's agent, but I was also really keen on buying into a different state as well, mainly because I saw a lot of growth in Sydney. And I thought, for $500,000, you can get a freestanding house. Seems like really good value. And I could actually go do a lot more things with it, right? I actually can do the front facade and renovate and do inside, outside. So a lot of work can be done. Yeah.
Perfect. Is that a similar technique that property in terms of, buying, renovating, same sort of thing? What's the numbers on that one?
Yeah, 100%. So for me, my style of investing is very much finding properties that have a discrepancy in value. So what I mean by that is look at unrenovated versus renovated properties and look at price discrepancy within that suburb. So if you can buy a house that is significantly cheaper than a renovated property in the same suburb, similar spec. So if it's a 3-bedroom house, unrenovated selling for $500K, and then you're seeing down the road there's a $600K sale on another house that's renovated, you can see there's a big uplift in terms of difference there.
Mm-hmm.
So I love buying those sorts of properties where you can go in, have the ability to do the renovation. You may not need to do it right away, right? But it gives you the ability to be able to do it later and execute on a uplift in equity plan.
Are you doing the renovations yourself at this stage because it's a different state, or are you coordinating in trades to do it?
In the beginning, I was doing a lot of myself. So I actually flew to Brisbane to go to this property.
Way. Yeah,
okay,
there you go.
Yeah. And my dad and mum got really interested as well. So they came with me because I had some friends in Brizzy.
Yeah.
So we flew there and the property was not in very good condition. The gardening hadn't been done for months. I think it was vacant for a while. So we went there and we fixed up the place a bit, just cosmetically, so that way it can be tenanted straight away. But a good learning for this property was that it was vacant for about almost 8 weeks.
Wow.
Right? Vacancy rates in Brisbane weren't very good at that time. And we also settled close to a Christmas period. So there was about 8 weeks of vacancy. So that was a really good learning, is to try to look at areas where you can actually reduce the vacancy or get a tenant in pretty quickly. Because it's all about cash flow management, right? And at that time, I didn't really know how to manage cash flow. It was more just buy a property, get it rented out. But yeah, sat on it for about 8 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that how long the reno took?
No, we didn't do a big reno. It was just more cleaning up the space.
Yep.
So that was really quick. We did that in one weekend and went back home.
Oof.
Yeah, but obviously during the Christmas period, it took a while to get a tenant in. But still, until today, that property is still the same condition as I bought it. I hadn't done any major renos to it.
Wow.
But it's pretty old, so there is a lot of potential for me to renovate this property. Its purchase price $515. It's now valued desktop val just over $1 million.
Wow, so it's doubled in value,
Yeah.
and you can maybe get some more in the equity uplift. I mean, that's fantastic. One lesson I learned, similar to you, around tenants and timing days is if you are signing on a tenant in sort of November, December, January, never do a 12-month lease. Always do maybe a 14-month lease, so that ends in February, March, because although it is a good time, no one's working, to potentially move. A lot of people end of year have family stuff on, Christmas, holidays, they go away. It's always harder to find a tenant in that.
That's right. It's a good hack.
It is a good hack. I learned the same way as you with unfortunately leaving it empty. Now, I thought you learnt your lesson about units. Your next purchase was in Brighton, Sands, Sydney, New South Wales, and it was a unit. So what on earth drives you to come back?
Yeah, so this is, as I was saying before, I really didn't have a strategy, right? In the beginning, you're still trying to find your feet on what you're trying to do, and I was trying to time the market as well. So obviously timing for this property was not very good for Queensland, because 2015 to 2019 basically did nothing, and I thought I bought a dud. The good thing was the rent was basically covering itself, right? Okay. So the rental yield was about 5%, 6%, so pretty much covered the cost of the mortgage. So I was okay to keep it. I thought I bought a dud, didn't grow. So I was like, what next? I think I'm going to buy back in Sydney. Going back to the blue chip location.
Yeah.
And Sydney was still growing at that time. So I was like, okay, I think Sydney still has a bit more tank, left to go. So came back to Sydney. It's where I know better, right? And went back into another unit. This time I was a little bit better. Bought in a low rise. Okay. So it's a block of 12, I think. So smaller block, more tightly knit, less strata. It's also a 2 bedrooms, slightly bigger as well. But again, didn't really know what I was doing.
Okay.
Right. Came in. It was older property too, so did the same thing. All I knew was I just wanted to go find a property where I can go renovate it later on, get the uplift in equity and rent, so I can try to rinse and repeat.
By this stage, you're. I can see purchase price is $615. This is 2019, so you've went 2013. You've had a 2-year gap. 2015, you've had a 4-year gap. Now you've probably been at Optus for about 8 years or something by now. So has your income grown enough and the rents have grown enough to make that purchase?
Yeah.
Are you saving up for those deposits, or are you still using equity for those?
Mostly equity at this time, because the property in Sydney and then the property in Queensland had a little bit of equity, but not too much. So a combination of equity and savings. But the main thing that did drive that third purchase was income. So like you said, I'd been there for about 8 years. So I was very driven on trying to earn more money, because I knew that pay rises were going to give me additional borrowing capacity. So every year I was just so keen on trying to get a pay rise or a promotion. And Optus is a really big place. So every 2 years I was moving jobs.
Wow.
So different roles, different departments. So my pay rises were decent. I think by that time I'd hit about 100K in base income, and bonuses were relatively okay. You get about 10%, 15% of your bonus if the company was doing well.
Yep.
And at that time, Optus was doing pretty well. So that fueled the borrowing capacity for that third purchase.
Okay.
Yeah. One
question I have with you, prior to coming on, you mentioned that, Michael Shah, who we had back a few weeks ago, was your mentor. What we learned in that conversation with Michael was that he got into that southeast Queensland market very early on before we had the boom.
Might have noticed.
I'm looking at your portfolio purchases, and I'm seeing quite a lot of purchases after this. Call it 4 in that southeast Queensland corridor. They are all quite cheap. You're in the 200,000 and 300,000s. So I'm interested to hear, was that sort of Michael's influence with getting you in that market, or?
Yeah, very much. So This is where I really started to begin to go really hard on property. Got really addictive as well, because I met Michael. Because after this third purchase, I was still not sure what to do. Right, I just didn't know where to take the portfolio. Saw a little bit of luck, bit of growth, but it wasn't incredible. So I decided I need to change my strategy. I need to talk to some different people. Met Michael, and he became my broker. Funny story, actually, I went to uni with his wife.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so very small world. So I met Joe at uni. We studied together for a couple of years, and then after that, I found out Joe was dating Michael. And then she goes, "Oh, why don't you have a chat to Michael? He's a broker." So met up with Michael. Michael showed me this roadmap, and he goes, "Jyh, you can hit 10 properties." And I was like, "You're kidding me. Like, seriously, how?"
Yeah.
And so he explained to me how to do it, using the multiple tiers of lenders to structure it. And I had no idea that I could do that. And I was like, just blew my mind. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, all these years I could have actually built the portfolio up even harder, but I was buying higher purchase price, right? So he said, why don't you have a look into Logan, Southeast Queensland? He just gave me a suggestion. And so he wasn't saying go buy there, but he's like, just have a look into it. So I started doing the numbers, and I got addicted. I started getting my Excel spreadsheet out, looking at the purchase price, the rental yield. And at that time, interest rates were relatively lower, right? Kind of sit around.
What's that, 2020? Yeah, okay. So yeah.
Yeah. And rates had come down because of COVID, hitting that 2%, 3% range. And when I was doing the numbers on the yields, you cash flow positive a few $100s a month straight off the bat.
Wow.
So I was like, this is a no-brainer. I just started looking into the numbers, doing the spreadsheets up. I even showed my parents, because they were not very against me buying in Queensland, because they didn't see the growth.
Yeah, okay.
And I had an argument with my dad. I was like, oh, I really want to keep going. And he's like, don't risk your money there. But I just showed him the spreadsheet. I said, look, it's a no-brainer. You're basically buying at the same price that many people bought many years ago. Like a lot of those purchases, if you look in the spreadsheet, that's price. If you go back to the sale price of what people bought them for potentially 5 years, 10 years ago, was almost the same. Some of them we actually picked up even cheaper than what the owner paid.
But what gives you the confidence then? Because a lot of people will look at that and say, this property is for sale for $300,000. The owner bought it 10 years ago for $300,000. What gave you the confidence that that property was going to take off?
Yeah.
And didn't just have another 10 years where you were going to sell it for $300,000 to the next person?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And I think that comes with understanding a few things. So it gave me confidence. I know it was very scary because you look at it and go, it hasn't moved for 10 years. And that's exactly what my parents said. And they go, why would you buy in this place if it hasn't moved? The owners have lost money over the last couple of years. And so what I thought about that was a couple of things. Is it worth taking the risk? And I thought it is, because if they haven't moved in 5 years, 10 years, incomes have risen, right? Land value has risen. Replacement cost of the building has also increased. So can these three things go down in the next couple of years? Very unlikely. Incomes are not expected to drop in the next couple of years. So I just thought it's primed for growth. I didn't know it was going to happen, but I just thought it's almost a no-brainer. Like, how much cheaper can it get? How much can a $300,000 property get even cheaper? It's almost impossible. To knock down that house, to rebuild it would cost you $300,000 to get a new building on top.
Yeah, definitely these days.
So I just thought it's worth taking this risk. And in 2020, I think we were really hard. We bought about 4 properties in 1 or 2 years in the space of a quick time frame.
5 in 2020 and 2021. So you did go hard very quickly. Are you getting creative with your lending at the time in terms of trust structures and stuff like that, or are these in personal name? Because you look at 5 purchases in 2 years, definitely not normal. Most of them are $200,000 and $300,000, but that is a lot of even equity to have. So are you doing that in cash and bone? Like how are you making those purchases, structure, income, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, a lot of it is all personal name. Like all our properties are in personal name except for our commercial property.
There you go.
Yeah.
You heard it here, folks. So it is possible to build out. You've got 13 now. I know you've sold 2, 15 total, sold down 13. All 13 are in personal name. You don't have a trust.
We have a trust, but we don't use it right now for any of those properties.
Okay.
Yeah.
Incredible. So how have you done that? Because you've in 2020 and 2021, you've bought 2. I'm just doing the calcs. You've bought $1 million. 3. You bought $1.8 million in property. You've bought 5 properties in that time frame. I mean, even at 10% deposits, it's a lot of cash to have. How have you done that?
Yeah, so a lot of them were spread out. So Danica, my wife, she bought some in her name, and I bought some in my name.
Okay.
So she's a dentist, so we were able to use 10% deposit to get in with no LMI. So that was a way to get into the market as soon as possible with a much lower deposit. And I was using a combination of cash and equity as well.
When did you meet your partner? When did she come into the timeline here?
Pretty much exactly at 2020. We met 2018 or 19.
Yeah.
But she started buying her first property in 2020.
Were you dating back then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you were aligned on property too from the get-go?
She was really much into shares.
Yeah.
And so I convinced her to get into property.
Yeah.
And so she started getting a little bit addicted to it as well.
Okay, interesting. Because a lot of people, I think, fall off. I feel like your partner is crucial, especially when you're in the property game, is that even if you're misaligned 1% at the start, the further you go down that track is the further apart that you two get if you're not fully aligned. So it's great that you guys were. And then I can see early 2021, 2022. When does the move away from Optus happen and to start sort of this broking game? And what is that sliding doors moment? I mean, we're talking about what mine was prior to this episode, but was there a day that you worked at Optus that you said, nah, you went home to Danica and you said, this is it, I'm leaving? Or what was the pivotal moment?
Yeah, you're very spot on. So 10 years at Optus, you see a lot of things, right? When you work in such a big company, what I noticed was every 2 years there was restructures. So I didn't feel stable and I didn't feel safe, even in such a large company. There's always instability, right? There's always people getting made redundant. So your financial future is actually not even guaranteed in such a big company, right? They look after you, but at the end of the day, they can easily just cut you.
Yep.
And I was very driven. I was very entrepreneurial. So I'd started a gym business in 2017, got into F45, which I just sold last week.
Wow.
So I've exited out of that, but ran that for about 8 years. And that also had additional income for me. So I was working 7 days a week, right? Working as a personal trainer, coach, and that was additional income that I could save.
You're a franchisee owner at F45.
Yeah.
What's the, sorry to segue, but I'm interested. Is there money in those gyms? You see what's happening with F45 at the moment, but it seems like a lot of work for potentially not a lot of pay, or what's the secret sources behind the F45 franchises?
Look, before COVID, it was printing money, doing really well, right? Because F45 was the first franchise that came into Australia to set the scene for HIIT training.
Yep.
And I was a gym junkie back then. Loved going to the gym, and I thought I wanted to get into a business with a passion. And so I thought, okay, well, gym would be a good idea. It was a low cost entry because you don't need to go buy out massive commercial equipment. So got into that. It was doing pretty well up until about COVID. And then after COVID, it took a big hit, right? Because we had lockdowns for about 2 years. And so a lot of the gyms basically had to either shut or you had to look at different ways of making money. So it was really difficult throughout those 2 to 3 years. And then afterwards, when everything went back to normal, it took a while to build back up to pre-COVID levels. A lot of studios did close during that time because they weren't running good operation. Good thing is I had a business partner who was very much in the fitness space. So we ran it really well, and we looked after our customer base. We looked after our trainers and coaches. I was also coaching there as well. Whereas a lot of the other F45 models that I saw, even gym models, they're very investor-led, right? So you have investors running it, right? But they won't focus so much on the actual service or the product.
Okay.
It was more money-driven.
So the keys to be sort of in there on the ground.
Correct. That's right. Yeah. So I was very much working in the business as well. And that
this
obviously
is after
helped.
You're doing like the 6 a.m.s and the evening shifts outside of Optus time.
Yeah, after work, I'd go straight from Optus straight to F45. Weekends, I'd wake up early, go coach there.
Respect.
Yeah.
The man's grinded. Was the and then the profit last week, the sell, was there much fat in that, or?
Look, to be honest, not too much fat. A lot of it was just recouping our initial capital.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But we had made some money kind of pre-COVID, and that definitely helped the property journey.
Okay, and the increases there. So back to the broking and the jumping out. You were saying you had that entrepreneurial blood, instability. You're not safe. 2 years is every restructure like there is in those sorts of big companies. What's the moment though?
Yeah, so I hit my 10 years,
Yep.
and I was going through a pretty depressive state, to be honest. Like during that time, I just was thinking about career growth. I didn't know exactly where I wanted to go into my next move at Optus, and I didn't really see a future. I was looking around at all the directors and the C-level and the kind of the senior leaders, and there wasn't anyone that really inspired what I wanted to do, to be very honest with you. I looked around and I didn't really want their life. I wanted to create something for myself and wanted to control my own future. And that's where I was really inspired what Michael was doing with his own journey and his own business. So I asked Michael if he could mentor me to become a broker. Wow. So I wanted to do something in property. And I thought finance would be really good because I had studied finance, came from a commerce background. And finance is a good way to get into the industry because I'm not selling anything. I'm helping people in their journey, and I can share my journey and document it along the way. So it was very much more of a helping people rather than trying to sell people something. And so that got me into broking. And Michael gratefully agreed to mentor me.
Yeah.
And he mentored me for about 2 years whilst I was building up JD Capital. I had to sacrifice quite a fair bit, moved back home with my parents at that time.
Wow.
Sold my car.
Yeah.
Just before I quit, I'd refinanced all of my properties to pull all the equity out. And I think that gave me the financial security. If it wasn't for the property portfolio, I wouldn't have been able to start JD Capital. Because I didn't have the equity, I wouldn't have had the equity in cash sitting there.
What sort of amount are you pulling out there as that safety net?
Look, it wasn't huge. It was only probably about 100 grand at best.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just a cushion to cover me because, as you know, in broking, first 2 years, most brokers don't make any money, especially during the first year because it's a commission-based role. And when you get leads, they probably don't convert till 3 months or 6 months, right? So the first 6 months, you're not really making any income. And so a lot of people were saying it's not an easy industry to get into. So if you want to get into it, you want to have some cushion on the side or have some buffers.
Yep.
So that's where I went all in and handed in my resignation. Well, actually, I had a career break.
Yep.
Because I had my 10 years. So I was about a 2
Long
months or
service
3.
leave?
Yeah, long service
Nice.
leave. So basically use that leave to build up the business and use that time to build it up. So that way when I started, I wasn't just starting from nothing. And so I moved back home, cut all my expenses.
What age are you when you moved back home?
I think I was 31.
Wow,
31.
man.
Yeah.
Look, respect, because I think a lot of people are worried about, if you were the type of guy, you're not, but if you were the type of guy to worry about what other people would think and be like, fuck, I don't want to move back in with my parents, that's embarrassing, my friends, my family will see that, you would have never have quit. You'd still be in Optus. You'd still be absolutely miserable. Who knows how depressed you'd be now, 14, 15 years in at Optus. Where are you at there with what people thought of you and moving back in with your parents at 31 years of age?
Yeah, look, it wasn't easy to stomach, right? Because you see, I saw all my friends started to move up in their ranks, in corporate, doing really well. They're getting married, having kids. And I'm doing completely the opposite to what they're doing, restarting my life from scratch. So it wasn't easy to stomach, right? But I think what I've learned is you got to run your own race, right? At your own pace, right? Because if you're doing things by what societal norms are, then that may not fulfill what your dreams are. And for me, my dream wasn't to stay in corporate. So I knew the only way out was if I changed my life. And to change my life, I had to make some drastic changes. And so I took the gamble, right? I moved back home and sacrificed a lot. Didn't go out, no partying, barely saw my friends. But I knew that if I worked really hard for the 2 years, it will get me to the next level.
In respect, and I think a lot of people fall into the trap of, if you do what the other 99% of people do, you get the results of what the other 99% of people have, and most of the time you're looking for that 1%, so you've got to be going out. So, man, my full respect to you for doing that, because even at 31 years of age, I know a lot of people, I know a lot of friends that have had that option put there to them, but their ego is bigger than, probably what their dreams are, and they don't want to do that because they don't want to move back in with their parents.
And to add to that point, it's never too late, right? Even at 35, 40, 50, it's never too late. If you want to change your career, you want to chase what you want to do. That's what I've learned is you can make it happen.
How long were you living with your parents? For 2 years?
2 years.
2 years at the start?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's sort of throughout COVID, right?
Yeah, basically. It was good timing because I couldn't really go anywhere anyway. Yeah. So all I could do was just, heads down, bum up and work.
And what's your early advice? Because I know there's going to be people out there that are starting out and growing that brokerage business, but you've won some awards and you had some recognition really early. So how did you start off? How did you sort of grow? How did you really put your foot down to get a really good start in the brokerage business?
I think if I reflect back on what worked really well was I took a lot of learnings from Optus. Being in a corporate environment, you learn a lot about building businesses, and you also learn about a lot about customer management, marketing as well. I took a lot of learnings from F45. That was my first ever business. So I had a little bit of success with that, but also a lot of failures too. So what I learned really well about all of that and put it together into JD Capital was you have to really focus on looking after your first initial clients, right? Just give really, really good service, right? You don't have to start out and start doing all this marketing, try to put yourself out there because no one knows you in the beginning, right? And you don't really have that much credibility to start with anyway. So what I really focused on doing was just look after the first few clients really, really well, try to document what I did for them and how they grow their portfolio as well. and then they will be your best referrers. I didn't have any referral partners to start off with either. It was just do really, really well by your customers, build a good process and system around that, and then replicate that process. And then I was just documenting my journey along the way. I didn't really have too much to show. I was just showing what I was doing, what my clients are doing, just consistently putting content out there every single day. One thing that I noticed was with the brokerage industry, a lot of people are good with finances and numbers, but you don't have many brokers that were good at putting themselves out there, right? Even today, you don't see many brokers put themselves out there. Or the content that they put out there is quite dry. It's just like LVR, interest rates. It's very boring, right? It's not sexy. No one really wants to listen to a broker go, hey, what's your interest rate?
You know what I've noticed though? It's a funny offshoot, but a lot of the brokers were posting, say, on LinkedIn about the cash rate. Every time we'd have a cash rate hold or cut, all the brokers would come out and use that as a stat. It
doesn't mean anything to anyone, right?
Doesn't mean anything. But then all the marketers and that said, you shouldn't be saying that. That's dry. That's dull. Yeah. And then, like, obviously, when we had the most recent hold, I saw hardly anyone post about it because I think everyone was scared, thinking, oh, this is shit content. I don't want to be roasted. I'm not going to post anything. So then no one posted about it. So you can't win.
Yeah.
You can't win. Okay.
So, I just wanted to do something different because I knew I came from a marketing background and I thought you have to definitely put content out there, right? Like it's a good thing to put yourself out there, but I wanted to do content in a different way. And that's where instead of doing posts on interest rates and LVRs and different bank products, I was doing more property investing content. So what was I doing with my property journey? How did I build equity? How did I go buy the second property, third property? Exactly what we're discussing today. And then naturally you start to attract the right type of clients because they want to do what you potentially have done. And then that's what creates a lead or a customer.
How did you get the first couple? Are they family?
Always friends and family.
Okay.
Yeah, it always starts off with friends and family.
Yeah,
You do
enough.
a couple of loans for them, and then slowly starts to build. And in 2020, I did rent an office as well in the city after I built up a little bit of success. So a little co-working space, and in that co-working space, there was a couple of other brokers and a BA as well. So started to build a little bit of a network there, and then we started building up some mutual referrals.
And is there a deal or a moment that you feel like you've got that you're over the top of the hill and it feels like you've got a little bit of momentum and you're doing a little bit, like you can see that the hard work's paid off? When does that moment has that moment happened yet?
First year and second year was really when you start to see the momentum come. It's like a flywheel. So the beginning, the effort is a lot, right? But as you get push more and more of the effort, the flywheel starts to turn faster and faster. That first year and second year is where I started to see the referrals from the first few clients started to come. And then after the second year, you start to get people seeing their property values grow. And then you can pull equity out and then they're now buying the second, third property. So the second year, I would say, really started to kick off. First 2 years is very much building phase. But then you see the growth of your clients too. And that's the great thing about this industry is you get to witness the growth of others as they're building themselves too. And that's very fulfilling.
This is true. This is true. And I mean, the great thing we said also with Michael, you also get the inside scoop to see where everyone else is buying. That's
the best part.
Yeah.
Because if you're not in the industry, you have no idea.
Yeah.
You would just look at the map and go, where do I buy?
Where do you start?
But then we see all the contracts and the purchases come in. So we're just Googling them, going, where is this place?
Yeah.
Where's the money? What's the rental yield look like? What's the vacancy? And then you start to see all the numbers start to trend. And then you're like, okay, maybe we'll look into this spot.
Yeah. And at what stage do you move back out and you say to your parents, thank you, I appreciate it, I'm ready to go on my own now?
Well, after 2 years, I moved back out and then started renting with Danica, my wife. And we started renting in Chatswood. And we're very fortunate. So the reason that we've been able to get here is for a number of reasons, like obviously having a partner, having a good income on her side. But because she works for the Defence Force, so she moves around every 2 years in the Navy, and they cover some of our rental expense. So that has helped significantly.
Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of holding a running cost.
Yeah.
Is there a PPR purchase here a couple of years ago? Is that what I can see In terms of, no, hang on.
Yeah, there is a PPR.
Is that PPR?
Yeah.
Is Chatswood PPR?
Chatswood, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we wanted to change our strategy a little bit there. So we built up a bit of a portfolio, and then we saw how crazy the Sydney market was going after COVID, right? And we thought it was going to be very difficult to try and buy a freestanding house back in Sydney in the next couple of years, right? With houses going like what it's doing now.
Yeah.
And that property came by really interestingly. So we wanted to get a PPR because eventually we would want to settle down in Sydney and Chatswood or somewhere around there and be in the North Shore. And we came across this deal when we went to the auction day without even seeing this property before. So we were looking for property for about a year or two, never bought anything around Chatswood. But what happened was this property went to auction about 2 weeks before Christmas.
Okay.
So I went to auction and there was only probably about 3 bidders there, 3 people.
So you're still in the market. You've got a lot of debt on terms of the properties that you own. Is there any sell down or, I mean, this is a purchase of in excess of $2 million. So how are you, is a lot of people, by then you've had 2, 4, 6, 8, you've got 10 plus properties. Is there a sell down, or what's your strategy property wise to be able to secure the PPR? Because you've got a lot of debt, you do have a lot of income servicing that debt, but then that big property, that big PPR purchase is unserviced, obviously, by rental income. So what's your strategy with being able to afford that?
Yeah, very good question. So we sold down, I think we sold down on the North Sydney property. So profited a little bit of that. And because we lived in that, or I lived in that property initially, there was no capital gains tax. So we used a 6-year rule, which is a really, really smart rule, right? You can, if it's past 6 years, you can prorata as well. So that property, I basically paid almost no tax.
Explain the 6-year rule for us.
So if you buy a property with the intention to live in as an owner-occupier property, all right, and then you move out of that property and it becomes an investment, you have up to 6 years where you can claim CGT-free exemption. So it's a really, really good hack if you buy a property initially as an owner-occ and then you turn it into an investment. And apparently, if you look on the ATO website, there's actually no time frame. You could move back in and move back out, and that 6-year rule resets.
Yep.
As long as the property was intended to be your PPR in the beginning, it can be CGT-free.
So a couple of sells. So you've sold one of the WA ones. So that was enough to sort of foot that profit and initial expenses, or is there another big equity cash out?
Big equity cash out from a lot of those properties that we bought in Logan, because they'd grown up significantly. So huge amount of equity. My broking business was also taking off at that time, so started to build up really well, which helped service the loan. But to talk a little bit about the servicing side, we had to be a bit creative because I just got around 2 years of financials, but it wasn't quite enough to service the entire debt using a big bank, like a major bank. So this is where I started using alternative products, right? Using tier 2 and tier 3 lenders. I knew that if I could buy this property in today's value, and it was such a good deal, because I'll tell you about the deal later, it was such a good deal that I was worth paying more interest for. So I went with a tier 2 lender like Pepper Money, and they let you use 1 year financials because my 2 years averaged out wasn't that great to service the deal. But if I use the most recent year and then annualize it with the BAS statements, we could use a different product to increase the servicing.
Got ya.
So it's really good for business owners because the first 2 years of a business is usually going to be lumpy income, but that second year of income will be generally a lot stronger. Most banks want to see 2 years, but now you've got more and more lenders that are adopting 1 year. But sometimes you got to show evidence. So if your BAS statements are annualizing to show that it's increasing, they will support and let you use 1 year income. So that's what I was doing. So I was using that sort of product and that sort of lending to get the borrowing capacity, but the rates were high. It was about 7%.
Okay.
And I was thinking, should I pay 7% to go get this property? And that's where I started to look into the numbers because this property was purchased at 2.18. The median house price in Chatswood was 3 mil. Okay. And when I went to the auction, I had a look at the street sale for this area, right? And a couple of properties down the block sold for around 2.6. So on the same street, right? And it was actually a semi. This is a freestanding house. So a lot of people weren't interested in this property because it was poorly presented. wasn't styled. It looked like the owner wanted to get out pretty quickly. They had only owned it for 12 months from what I could see.
Mm-hmm.
And on auction day, there was almost no one there. So I turned up at auction, I registered, and even the agent told me, I don't think you're going to get it, because he goes, what's your max? Because he'd never seen me at the previous inspections. He's like, are you here to bid? And I'm like, yeah, I'm here to bid.
Okay.
And he goes,
so you hadn't seen it, you only saw it sort of on auction day. You'd be looking at it maybe online?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Just online.
You've done some comps on the street, you think, hang on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I looked at rough RP data estimates in terms of vowels sitting around 2.5.
Okay.
So I thought this would be a bargain of a deal if I could get it cheaper.
Yeah.
And then at auction day, there was only me and this other person bidding. And I thought, where is everyone? Like, no one's bidding. And it was 2 weeks before Christmas.
Yeah.
So I just tried my luck.
Yeah.
I bid up to about 2 mil and pulled out, and they passed in. So,
Perfect.
yeah, no one else was bidding, so they stopped
Did
it.
the other person that was registered to bid too?
Yeah, they did, but they also stopped too. So in the end, it was just private negotiations. So they said, come in, we'll privately negotiate. They said the owner wants to sell today. If you can offer it a little bit higher, we'll get the deal done. So we were just going back and forth with the other guy, and eventually we settled on 2.18.
Yeah.
But the comps on this property were about 2.5, 2.6.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good way to make 400
Yeah.
grand, 400 grand straight away, right?
So it was a bargain of a deal, but I could tell why people were put off by it, because it was opposite commercial buildings.
Yep.
So a little bit noisier, but the commercial properties there weren't that, they weren't too bad. And it was on a slight slope. A lot of land at the back that was unused. So potentially could fit a small dwelling or a granny flat. So I saw some potential there.
Yep.
But the front house is very small.
Sloping to the street or away?
Sloping, it's on a slant.
Okay.
Yeah. So not flat land.
Okay.
Right.
So it's not sloping like down away from the street or to the street. It's just on maybe a hill?
Yeah. Just on a hill. Yeah. So I think some people were put off by that. And then there was a crack at the back of the wall. Right. So it looked like there was some building structure issues.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, we have friends that are in that space, and Danica's dad's a Sparky as well. So he came to have a look, and he said, look, it doesn't look too bad. It's not that bad.
The Sparky, the structural.
He sees a lot of things. And I think a lot of people were put off by it because the BMP report, which was provided to buyers on the day, it had sounded like it was terrible. It sounded like it was a structural issue.
Mm.
Yeah. But we took the gamble. I was like, this price is too good. We'll do some work and fix it up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. Yeah. And I guess the key learnings there is right place, right time.
Yeah. And buy what people are scared of, right? A lot of people see things as risks, which can be genuinely a risk. But what I've learned is successful investors manage risks very well. And if you can manage the risks well, you get to see the upside.
And this is from Michael's learnings too, and the key there is to buy the risks that money can fix, not the risks that money can't. Like location next to a freeway, flood zone, fire zone, you can't fix that with money. However, the cracks and stuff may be a little bit more expensive, 100%. But you can fix it. And if like you said, if it's worth 2.5, you're picking it up for 2.18. It'd have to be some pretty significant cracks to for you not to be able to fix that and still have some equity in there.
That's right.
Probably to round out the portfolio, and one of your last purchases, that was commercial in your self-managed super fund.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about the strategy and the thoughts around that purchase.
Yeah, so now we're pretty much at the point where we want to take a little bit of a different approach to the portfolio. We built up a pretty strong residential base. Mm-hmm. And the more I start getting into property, what I've learned is residential property helps you build the equity, right? That's what you want. You want capital appreciation so you can get equity. Cash flow on residential property, to be honest, is not great. If you take out all the expenses, property management fees, interest, all of the holding costs, you're basically netting pretty much very little. So it's not really enough to live off. Right? And what we want to try and create is recurring income that we can use later on, right? So when we do retire, not that we want to retire anytime soon, mm-hmm. but later on have that recurring income to actually pay for your lifestyle. Residential property isn't really going to do that unless you have it fully paid off, right? But what it does do, it gives you the equity base. So what we can do is use equity to pour into commercial assets that give you much higher yields. And another story is, as a tenant running the gym, I've seen all the upsides of the commercial landlord.
Okay.
Because I've been the tenant.
And you're paying all the outgoings.
I'm paying all the outgoings. So I'm like, I want to be the commercial landlord.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's where I started to learn a lot more about the differences between commercial and residential. A lot of people get scared of commercial because they see the risks of businesses flopping, which is true. It is high risk because if the business goes belly up, then, the landlord potentially won't have any rent. But again, it's all back to managing risk and tenant selection. So I thought I wanted to be the commercial landlord now, because now I can see that the net yields are way stronger because you've got outgoings being paid by the tenant. And generally speaking, there's nothing much to fix, right? If it's a commercial warehouse or if it's a retail, for example, all of the things that need to be fixed is usually the tenant, right? So as the landlord, you just have to make sure the building is secure. So we decided to use our super funds combined because we're kind of running out of servicing and borrowing power in our personal names. And SMSF is another trend that I'm seeing right now, is a lot of people who are capped out in their personal capacity. You can still buy in your super, and that's treated completely as a different entity. So all of your personal debts don't even get rolled into SMSF. So servicing power is completely separate. So we use the super funds in there to go buy a warehouse near Newcastle.
Yep.
And that was a small commercial warehouse. Tenant's an electric vehicle maker. And we thought, that's the way of the future. It's a good tenant. Their business is growing. All outgoings paid by them. And pretty much we don't have to put any money out of pocket. That rent pays for everything.
Yeah,
P&I loan
I'm
as
looking,
well.
I'm looking just at the loan size and the rental income. Is you probably be positive.
It's neutral right now.
Yeah,
so
neutral.
pretty much just slightly positive, which
Yeah.
means even on a P&I loan, it'll pay itself off. And rents increase usually 4% or CPI every year. So what will happen is that loan will get amortized in way less than 30 years. So potentially in 20 years, they'll be fully paid off.
And you have rent of
rent.
50, 60
Yeah.
grand. That's great. What is your key learning looking back on where you're at now? 13 properties, 15 properties total. You've sold 2 of them. You're at 13. What is your key takeaway for anyone that's sort of watching this or listening to this and wanting to do something similar? I think one that I've learned from you straight away is that is the idea of trust. I think everyone gets sort of sucked into them really early on.
Yeah.
But you, my friend, are living proof that you can build up to 13 properties and not need them. Albeit business owner and running a couple of jobs at the same time, it's still possible. But what have been your key takeaways that you can instill on our audience for people that are sort of coming up and wanting to do something similar? Because I look at the majority of these purchases, and to be honest, it's apart from 3 made prior to 2020, it's been in the last 5 years that you've purchased, a lot of these properties.
Yeah.
So what's your key takeaways for anyone listening?
Look, my biggest takeaway for building a portfolio is have a short-term and long-term goal. Don't just have a long-term goal, because sometimes that long-term goal is so far away that it's hard to achieve, right? And it feels like it's really difficult to get there. But if you have small chunks and break it down, you then have actionable steps. So as an example, if you're starting out or if you're at property 2 or 3, trying to get to that next level, just map out what that next move looks like and speak to the right people. Because in the beginning, there's so much complexity. People selling you trust, people talking to you about buying house and land packages and all these different things, different strategies like, doing renos and flips, structural renovations, splitter blocks. There's so many strategies. What I realize is there's so many different ways to make money in property, but the proven way is buy and hold, right? Refinance, get the equity out and go for the next property. So I think if you work off that basis, just look at what deposit do I need as a minimum to get into that first asset. Try to buy the best quality asset that you can afford and try to buy well. That property doesn't need to be in the most flash location. It just needs to be good value, good buying. If you can buy under the median or potentially under market value, discrepancy in price with other properties in that area, you're getting a good deal. That's all you need to focus on, right? And then even if you don't want to do the renovation, you can do it later. You don't have to do it now, right? But you've got the ability to add value to that property if and when you want to, right? Whereas if you're buying a brand new property, you're really waiting for the market to do the heavy lifting. So I think that's a proven success and formula that lots of investors have done. And I've literally just replicated what I learned from Cherie Barber into my own portfolio.
Mate, that's great. And it's as simplistic as you said, the buy and hold is the safest. Is there anything else that you add on the back of that also for potentially anyone in the brokering scene wanting to get started and build up from there? What would be your advice to young brokers?
My biggest advice for young brokers is to focus on your niche, because if you're a master of everything or a jack of everything, you're not a master of any.
Yep.
And I think that's what I learned very quickly. Like, I don't know how to do a lot of different types of loans when I started out, but I was good at property investing. So I just focus on the investor market. And that way you attract the right audience too. Because if you start attracting all these different leads, you don't really have your niche and you can't really differentiate yourself. And there's 20,000 plus brokers. So there's a lot of choice for people to choose from. But the reason why someone wants to choose you is for a specific reason. So if you can build that niche and differentiate yourself, you're going to attract the right people. Yeah,
that's a good point. And you really want a specialist in this space. You don't want a generalist. These people that say they can do everything. Yeah, we can do that too. How many loans are they actually doing in self-managed super fund compared to the guy that's maybe specialises in that?
That's right.
Great point. And to Jyh, to end up these episodes, we usually ask our guests, what is a quote you live your life by?
I love this quote from James Clear from Atomic Habits. It's, you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. I love that.
Perfect. And I think as a mortgage broker, you'd have system after system.
That's right.
I know, talking to Michael, where he's got in place, no doubt you got something similar in your business. So, look, I really appreciate you coming out, Jyh, especially someone that I feel like is probably similar age to myself and has one of a realistic size portfolio. 80 properties and stuff that we did with Michael is great, but I think like 13, 15, like where you're at and how you've built it, especially over the last 5 years, is something that a lot of people can definitely take action, take learning experience from, and that they can do themselves. So appreciate you taking the time to come out today and share that with us.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me on.
No problem.